Hey guys, yeah, I'd like to say I'm welcoming my dear friend Axel Wrights to the channel. This is a topic we could smile about, but it's not really one to smile about. Axel, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time. Greetings to you, my friend Philip Schlaffer.
Yes, unfortunately, it's a sad topic again, but not one that comes unexpectedly, unfortunately. And I'm afraid it won't be the last time we have to deal with such a report.
Yes, you're right, Axel. It's no surprise. We've also discussed several times on this channel that especially extremists often end up in psychiatric care or are actually quite well taken care of there. This is about a neo-Nazi who announced a rampage citing Andreas Breivik as his role model. Maybe a brief info about Andreas Breivik. Yes, that's a brief info.
He attacked a social democratic youth camp as a sniper and murdered young people there. He then wrote a manifesto himself in which he picked up on many new right-wing narratives wanting to prevent foreign infiltration and Islamization and not shying away from violence. Unfortunately, that madness is still in too many people's minds.
This is an arrest now. I have alerts on my phone, so whenever something happens, I get push notifications. That can be annoying. On weekends, I often skip it. I'll be honest, I admit that, and I think to myself, yeah, a lot of people have rampages on their minds. People always talk about so-called jihadist Islamists, but that's also an issue with many right-wing extremists. But wouldn't it be contradictory to say that right-wing extremists want to carry out an attack? So let's take Andreas Breivik, who went to that island. Then there, I would say, from his point of view, he killed people, especially young people, who from his perspective were lives worth living. But still, he took the step to kill them. How do extremists distort that?
To look at the madness of extremism in a sober, objective way. On a rational level, of course, you'd have to say something like, wow, he wants to protect white people, he wants to protect Europeans. How can he kill white people and Europeans? But for neo-Nazis and right-wing extremists, that's not an issue. Because even white people who don't fit their way of life are seen as enemies and are supposed to be wiped out. Right-wing extremism often has a survival of the fittest mindset. We aim to create an elite group with only the best, fully committed members. Whoever isn't with us is against us. Anyone against us is weak, decadent, part of the problem, and supports the conspiracy. And in the end, they must be eliminated and eradicated just like the classic enemies. And of course, that was also a very deliberate attack on a social democratic youth camp. Because in Anders Breivik's eyes, those were the ones who kept promoting foreign infiltration, who did not acknowledge their cultural, ethno-cultural heritage. And that's exactly the kind of talk we hear here from right-wing extremists who wish for the downfall of the Western world, who fantasize about the collapse of the Federal Republic, so that all those who still stubbornly refuse to follow them and establish the Fourth Reich will finally be punished.
That brings me to the next point, which you've mentioned here several times before. It's very important to say this under this compulsion, because sometimes there are people who sit there and say, yeah, why should I care about right-wing extremists? Why should I care about neo-Nazis? Who then say, okay, yeah, maybe a bit of leadership, clean up here, secure the border, some force, some Gestapo. No, I joke, but that's really sometimes the kind of talk we hear. If you break it down, these people always think, yeah, okay, well, it won't affect me. I didn't immigrate here, or rather my parents didn't. There's no way I could be targeted by these right-wing extremists.
That's just the propaganda that falls on fertile ground. Well, the Nazis in Germany are the Nazis. They're against gay people, against trans people, against people with a supposedly wrong religion or a wrong cultural background. That doesn't affect me. I'm a potato, I'm white, I'm German, I'm heteronormative. None of that interests me at all. And in doing so, people overlook that this extremism, especially right-wing extremism, which promotes things like camaraderie, national solidarity, and slogans like Germans don't leave Germans alone, is constantly fighting among itself. Sorry, I had to smile myself. It's just so crazy that you almost have to laugh about it if it weren't so sad. You experienced it yourself back then in your own circle of comrades that someone was even murdered because of some trivial argument. I think you once said it was something like the color of the shoelaces.
Something like that, yeah.
And that's everyday business in the far right scene. The far right scene is like a cheap version of Game of Thrones. Everyone against everyone. Yes, there are constant intrigues. People are always attacking each other, and the conflicts in these structures are even carried out in physical altercations. It's totally insane to assume that, yes, that this scene where even the supposedly good comrades attack each other would then stop there, and also to target ordinary Germans. And often it's enough just to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And if you're not for the neo Nazis, in their perception, you're against them. Anyone not for me is against me, and any enemy must be fought by any means necessary. And sometimes that's enough as a simple pretext. Yeah, someone shouts a Nazi slogan and you looked at them funny. Bang, you get punched in the face like, oh, you don't want to join the march, we just invited you. Bam, you get punched in the face, you listen to American music. Bam, you get slapped, you eat a kebab. That's totally unacceptable. Yeah, smack, you get hit. There are so many things that in these delusions, in this fanaticism of right-wing extremists make you into an enemy, that it doesn't matter at all what skin color you have, that it doesn't matter at all what sexual orientation or gender identity you have. You become a victim when they just feel like putting themselves on display at your expense.
Yeah, let's see where someone like that comes from. This is an article from the TAS dated October 20th, 1927, specifically an arrest in Berlin. Neo-Nazi announced a rampage. A well-known neo-Nazi from Bavaria was arrested. He said he wanted to kill as many foreigners as possible. For now, he is in a psychiatric hospital. Here you can see Danny, speaker at Pegida Möbel Munich. We're probably talking about 9 years ago. Merkel must go. I still have my Merkel must go stamp. I just saw Danny again. I think Danny is Dan Eisinger. He's a public figure. I always say it. Whoever gets on a stage and gives a speech is putting themselves in the public eye. That's how this person will be treated. Do you see it differently, Axel?
I agree. Anyone seeking the public or attending events should show their face. And especially if you're acting as a speaker, as a carrier of ideas, and thus become part of the discourse, you no longer have a right to anonymity.
By Eric Peter, Berlin. A TikTok video shows a major nighttime police operation in Berlin-Kreuzberg in late September. It is now known that the Special Deployment Commando arrested Bavarian neo-Nazi Dan E. at a youth welfare facility. As initially reported by the Tagesspiegel, E is said to have previously announced a rampage. For me, that goes at the top. Axel, let me return to the top picture. But Pegida is here, right? That's 16 or 17, correct?
If there was a youth welfare facility there, then as a teenager, you wouldn't be there anymore either.
I understand, but the timeline still seems illogical to me. All right, Pegida.
Pegida, especially its state branches, existed and remained active independently for a long time. That was quite a while ago. He must have been very young on that stage.
Let's take a quick look. Then I'm in 2019.
So that's half a decade for sure. So that's already something. But the question is, how old is he? The question is, are there things that still don't make him an adult yet in terms of maturity and development? He could have developmental disorders. Of course, it could be that he stays in the youth welfare facility even at an older age than is generally usual, simply to enable him to take steps into life and to ensure his socialization as well, up.
At the request of TAS, the Berlin Public Prosecutor's Office confirmed investigations against Ehe on suspicion of threatening to commit crimes and violating the weapons law. The accused neo-Nazi is said to have stated in a therapeutic facility that before taking his own life, he wanted to kill as many foreigners as possible. An extended suicide that's coming from me now. Well, maybe some people will say, okay. He expresses that in the psychiatric ward or now in this residential group. Of course, previously in the psychiatric ward in this residential group, he can decide to seek attention. Let me get to the point, Axel. If you don't act, what happens? Someone hears it but doesn't share it. Today, you can use your kitchen knife, you can use your car, anything can be used as a weapon to seriously injure or even kill several people. There's really no other way to deal with it, right?
Being admitted to a psychiatric hospital isn't as easy as you might think. Just because someone is a bit crazy doesn't mean they'll end up in psychiatry right away. There has to be a danger to others or to oneself, which is the case in both situations here. And the only right thing to do when someone says something like that, even if it might have been said with a wink, which I don't believe, based on the reports I've received so far, someone like that has to be immediately removed from circulation. 1 minute is enough, a bad thought, and then the idea is put into action. Then someone starts running, and then people lose their lives. Even if it's just one life that's at risk, action must be taken. And that's exactly what happened here, very quickly and thankfully.
Tagesspiegel reports E allegedly planned to provoke police into shooting him during a rampage. A prohibited switchblade and data storage devices were seized during the search. E was temporarily hospitalized in a psychiatric facility with evaluation still pending per the prosecutor's office. Diane E is a former Nuremberg district official of the neo-Nazi party Die Rechte. He is said to have been living in Berlin for about 2 years. From the mid-2010s, he appeared as the organizer of the Pegida offshoot Nugida and as a speaker at right-wing extremist events such as Pegida Munich. Mid-2010s, so we're talking about 2015, 2016, that's 10 years ago, but he wasn't even 10 years old then.
He must be in his mid-20s, I guess. As the applicant, you actually have to be of legal age, so he must be in his mid to late 20s. It's really amazing that he's still living in a youth welfare facility. I think there's a lot going wrong for him. That's nothing to joke about. I feel sorry for the young man. Many people who also have psychological problems are then attracted to extreme structures, partly because it's self-destructive, partly because there are enemies you can focus on, and partly because a sense of belonging is offered there. We don't know, no idea. But if he was still placed in a youth welfare facility, then he probably wasn't considered to have any particular social maturity. Then he will still be considered a minor. In my view, there must be a significant developmental delay. Otherwise, I can't explain it now. Admission, review, and dismissal.
Dean is a former official of the K. I had that. According to a report by Bayerischer Rundfunk, he rallied the crowd there for a change of system and threatened journalists that when the time comes, they will be put back on the marketplace by the people in retaliation. He reportedly had it on his chest.
That was one of my unfortunately notorious statements, which I made when I was just 16. Where did I say that? Those who persecute and fight us today, pushing us out of work, will one day be put in the marketplace and shot. There are some nasty parallels coming up with what you're describing here in his talk. Well, I know that all too well from my own experience.
Unfortunately, just the classic angry Rachel thought. Yeah, and you have to take that seriously. That if some people, I think, could do whatever they wanted, then this country would fall into death and vengeance.
Or it would be absolute anarchy. It would be mass murder, like nothing else. So in that case, the hatred, one's own inadequacy, one's own world weariness are really not processed positively or channeled in a reasonable way. Instead of learning how to deal with it, people just try to smash everything and destroy everything around them, you know?
He reportedly has a Combat 18 neo-Nazi group tattoo on his chest. I think that says it all. 18 stands for 1 and 8 in the alphabet AH. Originating in England, this terrorist group later spread across Europe. It is the armed wing of Blood and Honor, a youth group banned in Germany since the early 2000s. This is background for first-time visitors. Contact with Berlin neo-Nazis. Taz reports e-civilization was briefly in a neo-Nazi exit program. He is also said to have unsuccessfully tried to join left-wing groups. Yeah, pretty interesting, huh? That we recorded something here before. I'm a supporter and so are you. I'm not adding what we recorded earlier. But people often think it happens too fast. No, it must go from the right ear into the left, exit there, then the program is crap and out again. And that's often a sign that some people are also carrying around completely different psychological problems. No, just where sometimes it's not even that political to begin with. It's more that two uninsulated wires are touching in the head, which they shouldn't, causing some short circuits, right?
Leaving like that is tough. It's not just given to you, and an exit program also requires effort from you. Yes, cooperation, yes, the willingness for self reflection, and eventually also letting go of cherished enemy images and cherished conspiracy narratives. And some people can't handle that. And if you're a person who has nothing else except your extremism, it's even harder to let go. Yeah, and if your synapses aren't working properly, or you have some kind of medical condition like generalized anxiety disorder, paranoia, or whatever, then sometimes it's really, really hard to let go. And if there's also a bit of pressure being put on you, or if an expectation is expressed that you just can't or don't want to meet at that moment, then you call it quits and try to reorient yourself. And what's interesting in this context is that many people imagine the left and right, especially the extreme ends, as if they were a straight line and there's a huge world in between. But in practical terms, if you put ideology aside, these ways of life are sometimes very similar. Yes, there's a sense of community. Yes, there's an enemy image, and there's a sense of self-exaltation as a fighter against injustice, as a fighter, yes, against an authority, against a power, against a conspiracy, whatever it may be.
An experiential world.
Many are simply searching for this sense of community, yes, for this moral compass, which is conveyed very strongly in these circles, that the complexity of the world suddenly drawn in black and white is much easier to bear. Yes, or they simply don't want to be alone. That's also a very important issue for many lonely extremists. And of course, as an extremist, you first have the problem of being lonely at times on the long road out during this marathon. Yes, because no one rolls out a red carpet, no one stands there and applauds. Many then try to do it very quickly, moving from one extreme to another, to get recognition there and to find a sense of belonging again, which they have now lost and been denied because of leaving the other scene. Yes.
It's also not completely unusual. Let me break it down again. Extremists, as I said, always seek out other extremists for a new home because that's their environment. They know, understand, and sometimes ingratiate themselves there. I can say it again. When you leave extremism, don't immediately rush into something else radical or extremist, but try to really get along with yourself for once. To create a normal environment without focusing on radical or extreme topics. Maybe it's better to join a sports or hobby club instead of jumping back into something like that right away. Sometimes it's about the person, though I won't name them online. I just saw someone I followed for 10 years. A really, really annoying person, at least from my point of view, who actually came from the hardcore scene or gave himself that title. That's not provable. Right-wing extremism that has now become extremely, extremely ultra left-wing extremist, where I think to myself, wow, I don't know if maybe something therapeutic is needed there, just like I needed it too. I really struggle with these leaps.
The key, and I think this is really important, so forgive me for these 2 or 3 more sentences. The key, yes, to combating an extremist worldview, which is always totally totalitarian. Whoever always prioritizes their own opinion should realize it's just their opinion and they can choose to insist on it. I can consider it the only right one, but I have to grant everyone else with a different opinion the same right. Yes, if I can't do that, I always have one foot in totalitarianism and therefore one foot in extremism. And that's why many people who see themselves as saviors of the world should maybe start by taking care of their own affairs, building their own lives, and achieving something practical. Because through these encounters, through these experiences, you quickly realize, hey, I am who I am, and I'm not perfect, and I'm not the savior of the world. I'm also just a very, very important point.
First, recognize yourself in this, and then maybe don't look for that ultimate salvation in the group again. He was here, and it was exciting each time. Axel, could you comment on that now? Recently, he was spotted multiple times at neo-Nazi events. Pictures show him at a counter-demonstration against the Christopher Street Day in Magdeburg in late August, attended by new neo-Nazi groups from Berlin. That would be unthinkable for me and in my area. Someone who has already turned to an exit program, was involved there, maybe even tried to ingratiate himself with left-wing groups, and then comes back and now hangs around with us again. That's not serious at all. That's not serious at all. It's not a closed, homogeneous movement. That's just not the case.
These demonstrations against the Christopher Street Day are especially shaped by a new form of right-wing extremism, which has a very eclectic worldview. At these demonstrations, East German flags are displayed alongside black, white, red flags, and various things occur. I'm conservative. I think NATO is good, a bit for overthrowing the system, so pretty much everything is represented there. Now, of course, we don't know if he communicated to the scene that he was in the exit program. That usually happens covertly in order not to endanger the participants in such programs. If he hadn't advertised it, it might have been overlooked. It's exactly the same with turning to left-wing groups if those left-wing groups didn't make it public and say so. Hey, a neo-Nazi came by here and wanted to join us. Maybe people didn't even notice. He was gone briefly, then returned. You don't know how he described it there.
I can even imagine.
That people like that even say, I just wanted to spy on the leftists. I just wanted to see if I could get some information. Even in my time, that would have been unthinkable.
I was just about to say,
a closed group
which controls each other, exercises mutual control, would already be difficult to explain. Where has it been for the last 6 months? I already find that hard, but let's return to this now. On to the next part. His attendance at the start of Julian M's prison sentence on the 1st also suggests ties to neo-Nazi circles. September in front of the Berlin Hackenfelder prison, the leader...
I made a small contribution as well. Feel free to tune in to see what that environment is like. Extremely militant, violent, and anti-constitutional. He really picked himself a nice environment there.
The leader of Deutsche Jugend Voran, now officially labeled right-wing extremist, was previously sentenced to over 3 years in prison for multiple violent offenses. He was scrutinized by law enforcement in 2015, days after a right-wing extremist knife attack on Cologne Mayor Henriette Recker. He was arrested during a neo-Nazi raid in Franconia on suspicion of forming a criminal organization. Those Nazis were accused of illegally obtaining explosives abroad. A total of 78 kilograms of pyrotechnic items, including at least 4 shell bombs, were seized, as well as a live firearm. They had planned attacks on 2 refugee shelters in Bamberg and on the anti-fascist space Balthazar. Yeah, it's not a joke anymore, you know, it's not just talking on the internet and so on, but now they're actually taking action, you know.
Especially against this background, when we see that someone has been active for 10 years in highly militant, you really have to say right-wing terrorist groups and was already planning to carry out attacks 10 years ago. Does it make even more sense now that this man was taken out of circulation very quickly and comprehensively?
E was released from pre-trial detention after a few days and shortly afterwards took part in a rally of the AfD in Nuremberg. When the trial took place 3 years later at the Bayreuth Regional Court, only 4 of the former 11 accused neo-Nazis were charged. E was not among them. It was not clear during the trial why they were not also charged, wrote the specialist magazine Der Rechte Rand. Yes, admission, review, and dismissal assignment, good arrest, important. It's an important thing to check these TikTok things, what people are spreading there, what people are saying there. Everyone can contribute their part to that. If you recognize criminal content in live streams there, you should record the evidence if possible, if the stream or the videos are still available afterwards. That can always help protect your loved ones and the loved ones of many others. That when these people snap, they just shoot random people on the street.
There are also reporting centers, yes, that do very good work where you can simply paste the link and briefly describe what was said. So it should be a matter of the heart for everyone not to tolerate such transgressions, not to sugarcoat them, not to sweep them under the rug. Ahaha, we were just joking. So anyone who threatens to use violence, anyone who threatens a rampage must be reported immediately and removed from circulation as quickly as possible.
Axel, quick input again. Check Axel Wright's book to see what's happening in Germany. My audiobook, Hate Creates Violence, is out and linked below. There's also a book version, just a bit of promotion. Thanks to everyone who supports this. Axel is already laughing, but if you want to see Axel live at Extremist Loss, sign up at info@extremistloss.